We all make mistakes in judgment. It's a part of being human. But some judgment errors are more common than others, and understanding these errors can help us make better decisions. One of the biggest problems is confirmation bias. This is when we look for information that confirms what we already believe and ignore information that contradicts it. For example, if you believe a certain political party is always right, you might only read news articles that support that party and ignore articles that criticize it. This creates a skewed view of reality. To avoid it, actively seek out different perspectives, even those you disagree with. Read articles from various news sources, and listen to people with different opinions. Try to understand their reasoning, even if you don't agree with their conclusions. Another common error is the availability heuristic. This is when we overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled. For instance, plane crashes are heavily covered in the news, making them seem more common than they actually are. Car accidents are far more frequent, but because they are less sensationalized, they feel less likely. We let memorable events sway our judgment. To combat this, focus on statistical data rather than relying on memory or vivid examples. Look at the actual numbers to get a clearer picture of the probabilities. The anchoring bias is another sneaky one. This is when we over-rely on the first piece of information we receive, even if it's irrelevant. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a car. The seller starts by quoting a high price. Even if you know it's too high, that initial number will unconsciously influence your perception of what's a reasonable price, making you willing to pay more than you should. To counteract this, be aware of the starting point, or anchor, and actively adjust your thinking based on additional information and independent research. Don't let a first impression completely dictate your final decision. Then there's the halo effect. This is when our overall impression of someone influences how we judge their specific traits. If we think someone is attractive, we might also assume they are intelligent or kind, even if there's no evidence to support these assumptions. Similarly, a negative first impression can lead us to attribute negative qualities even where they might not exist. Try to evaluate people's characteristics independently, focusing on specific actions and behaviors rather than forming a general overall opinion. Look at the specifics instead of the overall image. Overconfidence bias is another frequent problem. We often overestimate our abilities and knowledge. We might think we're a better driver than we actually are, or that we'll finish a project faster than is realistically possible. To avoid this, actively seek feedback from others. Ask for honest opinions on your work and performance. Consider your past successes and failures, acknowledging both your strengths and weaknesses realistically. Don't be afraid to ask for help when needed. The bandwagon effect also influences our decisions. We often make choices based on what others are doing, rather than our own judgment. If everyone else is buying a certain product, we might assume it must be good, even if we haven't researched it ourselves. To fight this, consider your own needs and preferences instead of following the crowd. Do your own research before making a decision based on what's popular. Remember, popularity doesn't always equate to quality or suitability for you. The framing effect involves how information is presented. The way a question or problem is framed can significantly impact our choices. For example, a sale described as 90% off sounds more appealing than 10% remaining. The same discount is presented differently, changing how we react to it. Be aware of how information is presented and try to reframe it in a neutral way before making a decision. Consider the actual figures and details involved, rather than just the marketing language used. And finally, let's consider the sunk cost fallacy. This is where we continue investing in something simply because we've already invested so much time or money in it, even if it's no longer worthwhile. Think of a project that's gone off the rails, but you keep pushing forward because you've invested so much already. Recognize when it's time to cut losses. Assess the current situation without clinging to past investments. Sometimes letting go is the best choice. Avoiding these common judgment errors requires conscious effort and practice. It's not about becoming perfect, but about improving our decision-making process. Being aware of these biases is the first step towards making better, more informed judgments in our lives. By actively challenging our own assumptions, seeking out diverse information, and thinking critically, we can move towards making choices that truly serve us.